The morning sun cast long shadows across Denver International Airport as thousands of travelers moved through the massive terminal like rivers flowing toward their destinations. Today was different from any other day in human history. Today marked the first civilian flight aboard the Celestial Horizon, humanity's newest commercial starship designed to carry passengers between Earth and the Mars colony in just 3 days. The excitement was electric, buzzing through conversations and lighting up faces as people clutched their boarding passes and stared at the enormous windows overlooking the launch pad where the sleek silver vessel waited. Dr. Maya Richards stood in line at Gate 47, with her carry-on bag and her priority boarding pass held carefully in her hand. She had dressed professionally in a navy blue suit, her hair pulled back neatly, trying to look the part of the serious scientist she was. At 34 years old, Maya had already accomplished more than most researchers did in their entire careers. She held 2 doctorate degrees, one in astrophysics and another in quantum mechanics. For the past 6 years, she had led the team that developed the quantum drive system now installed in the Celestial Horizon. Without her work, this ship would still be a dream on someone's drawing board. Today, she was traveling to Mars colony as the lead consultant to oversee the drive system's performance during actual flight operations. The line moved slowly forward. Maya noticed the gate agent, a man in his late 40s with thinning brown hair and a permanent scowl etched into his face. His name tag read Kyle Morrison. He processed each passenger with mechanical efficiency, barely looking at their faces as he scanned passes and waved them through. Maya watched as he smiled politely at some passengers and remained cold with others. She noticed a pattern she had seen too many times before but hoped she was wrong. When Maya reached the front of the line, she handed Kyle her boarding pass with a warm smile. He took it without returning the greeting and held it under the scanner. The machine beeped green, indicating a valid pass with priority boarding status. Maya saw the confirmation light clearly. So did Kyle. But instead of handing it back, he studied the pass more carefully, then looked at Maya with narrowed eyes. "This doesn't look right," Kyle said slowly, his voice loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Maya felt her stomach tighten but kept her voice calm and professional. "I'm sorry, but the scanner just confirmed it. Is there a problem?" Kyle turned the pass over in his hands, making a show of examining it closely. "Priority boarding? How did you get this?" "I'm Dr. Maya Richards. I'm the lead consultant for the ship's quantum drive system. My credentials are linked to the pass. You can verify them in your system." Kyle's expression shifted into something ugly, a mixture of disbelief and contempt. "Sure you are. Look, I don't know where you got this pass or who you think you are, but this is obviously fake." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Around her, she could feel other passengers stopping their conversations and turning to watch. "Sir, I assure you the pass is legitimate. Please check your system. My name should be on the priority list." "I've been doing this job for 15 years, Kyle said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I know a fake when I see one. People like you are always trying to scam your way onto important flights. You probably bought this off some website thinking you could sneak aboard." Maya felt heat rising in her face but forced herself to remain composed. "People like me? What exactly do you mean by that?" Kyle ignored the question and instead picked up his radio. "Security to Gate 47, we have a situation here. Passenger attempting to board with fraudulent documents." "This is ridiculous," Maya said, her voice rising slightly despite her best efforts to stay calm. "My pass is valid. I helped design the ship you're looking at through that window. Just check your computer system." "I don't need to check anything," Kyle said. He held up the boarding pass and then, with deliberate slowness, tore it in half. Then he tore it again. And again. Within seconds, Maya's legitimate priority boarding pass was nothing but confetti in his hands. He dropped the pieces into the trash can beside his podium with an exaggerated gesture. "There, problem solved. Next passenger, please." Maya stood frozen in shock. Around her, the other passengers erupted into murmurs and whispers. Some pulled out their phones and started recording. An elderly woman behind Maya spoke up. "Young man, that was completely uncalled for. She showed you a valid pass." "Ma'am, please stay out of this," Kyle said without looking at her. "This is a security matter." A businessman in an expensive suit stepped forward. "I saw your scanner approve her pass. I'm a witness to this." Kyle's face reddened. "I said stay out of it. Unless you want me to call security on you too." Maya took a deep breath, fighting back tears of frustration and humiliation. She had faced prejudice before, countless times throughout her education and career, but never quite so blatantly and never with such consequences. I'm asking you one more time to check your system and verify my identity. I have backup documentation in my phone. I can show you my government clearance, my employee badge, my university credentials. I don't care what fake documents you have on your phone, Kyle said. Your kind always has excuses and fake papers. Security is on their way and you're going to be escorted out of this terminal. You should be grateful I'm not having you arrested for fraud. 2 airport security guards arrived looking uncertain. Kyle immediately launched into his version of events, painting Maya as a scammer who had attempted to board with forged documents. Maya tried to explain, but Kyle kept talking over her, his voice getting louder and more aggressive. The guards looked at Maya, then at Kyle, clearly not sure what to believe. More passengers joined in, some supporting Maya and others staying silent. The scene was creating a bottleneck, with the line backing up and people craning their necks to see what was happening. The gate area became chaotic with voices arguing and phones recording every moment. Maya realized with growing horror that she might actually miss the flight she had spent months preparing for. Worse, she was being publicly humiliated and treated like a criminal for no reason other than Kyle's prejudice. She squared her shoulders and looked directly at the security guards. My name is Dr. Maya Richards. I work for the Federal Aerospace Division. I'm listed on the ship's manifest as essential personnel. Please verify this information before you make a mistake you'll regret. One of the guards reached for his radio to call his supervisor, but before he could speak, a commotion at the far end of the terminal caught everyone's attention. A woman in a sharp gray suit was walking rapidly toward Gate 47, flanked by 4 federal agents in dark uniforms. Her heels clicked sharply on the tile floor, and her expression was thunderous. People instinctively stepped aside to let her pass. Kyle looked up and his face went pale. Maya turned to see who was approaching and felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. She recognized that face from government briefings and news reports. Director Patricia Hayes had arrived and she looked absolutely furious. Director Patricia Hayes moved through the crowded terminal with the focused intensity of a missile locked onto its target. At 52 years old, she carried herself with the bearing of someone who had spent 20 years in military service before transitioning to civilian aerospace administration. Her gray suit was impeccable, her silver hair cut short and professional, and her dark eyes missed nothing as she approached Gate 47. The 4 federal agents accompanying her were from her personal security detail, and they cleared a path through the gathering crowd with practiced efficiency Patricia had been conducting. A surprise inspection of the new interstellar terminal facilities when her phone had buzzed with an urgent alert. One of the passengers at Gate 47 had used an emergency contact feature built into the priority boarding passes, a feature designed for exactly this kind of situation. When Patricia had pulled up the details and seen Dr. Maya Richards' name attached to the alert, her blood had begun to boil. She knew exactly who Maya was. They had sat on panels together, attended the same government briefings, and Patricia had personally signed off on Maya's security clearances for work on classified propulsion systems. The scene at Gate 47 was even worse than Patricia had imagined. She could see Maya standing with dignity despite obvious distress, could see the smug gate agent arguing with security guards, could see the crowd of passengers with phones out recording everything. This was a public relations nightmare and a serious breach of protocol, but more than that, it was a profound injustice happening right in front of dozens of witnesses. What is going on here? Patricia's voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. The authority in her tone left no doubt that she expected immediate answers and complete honesty. Kyle Morrison turned to face her, his expression shifting rapidly from annoyance to confusion to dawning concern as he noticed the federal agents and the identification badge hanging from Patricia's neck. I'm handling a security situation, ma'am. A passenger tried to board with fraudulent documents. Your name and position, Patricia demanded, stepping closer to Kyle's podium. Kyle Morrison, senior gate agent. And who are you? One of the federal agents stepped forward. You're addressing Director Patricia Hayes of the Federal Aviation Administration's Interstellar Division. Show some respect. The color drained from Kyle's face. Patricia watched with satisfaction as the reality of his situation began to sink in. Director Hayes, I apologize, I didn't realize. But I was just doing my job. This woman tried to board with a suspicious boarding pass and I had to take action. Patricia turned her attention to Maya, and her expression softened slightly. "Dr. Richards, are you all right?" Maya nodded, relief flooding her features. "Director Hayes, thank you for coming. I tried to explain to him who I was, but he wouldn't listen." "Tell me exactly what happened," Patricia said, her eyes never leaving Kyle's face. "And I want the complete truth." Maya took a steadying breath and recounted the events of the past 20 minutes, her voice calm, but with an underlying tremor of suppressed emotion. She explained how Kyle had scanned her pass, how the machine had confirmed it as valid, how he had then torn it up and called security on her. Several passengers nearby nodded in agreement and offered to show their video recordings. Patricia listened to every word, her jaw tightening with each detail. When Maya finished, Patricia turned back to Kyle. "Is this true? Did your scanner validate her boarding pass?" Kyle hesitated, and Patricia could see him calculating whether to lie or admit the truth. "The scanner showed green, yes, but sometimes these machines malfunction. I've seen it before. I used my professional judgment to determine that the pass didn't look legitimate." "Your professional judgment," Patricia repeated slowly, her voice dangerously quiet. "And what exactly about Dr. Richards made you question her legitimacy? What specific elements of her boarding pass appeared fraudulent to you?" "Well, I mean, she had priority boarding status and she just didn't seem like someone who would have that level of clearance. Priority boarding is usually reserved for important passengers, government officials, ship crew members." "Important passengers," Patricia said. "And you determined that Dr. Richards wasn't important? How exactly?" Kyle's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Patricia could see sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. Around them, the crowd had grown larger as more passengers delayed their own boarding to watch this confrontation unfold. Patricia pulled out her phone and held it up so Kyle could see the screen. "This is Dr. Maya Richards' official government file. She holds 2 doctorate degrees from MIT. She has worked on classified aerospace projects for 6 years. She is the lead developer of the quantum drive system installed on the celestial horizon. She holds a level 5 security clearance, which is higher than yours or mine. She has been awarded 3 federal medals for her contributions to space exploration. She is considered one of the top 50 scientists in her field in the entire world. She is absolutely an important passenger, and her priority boarding status is not only legitimate, but actually understates her significance to this mission." Kyle's face had gone from pale to bright red. "I didn't know all that. How was I supposed to know?" "She didn't say. She told you she was the lead consultant for the ship's quantum drive. She told you to check your system. She offered to show you her credentials. You refused to listen. You destroyed valid federal documents. You called security on a government scientist. You humiliated her in front of hundreds of people, and you did all of this after your scanner confirmed her pass was legitimate." "I made a mistake," Kyle said weakly. "I'm sorry. I'll issue her a new boarding pass right now." "You'll do no such thing," Patricia snapped. "You're not touching anything." "Security, I need you to pull the footage from the gate cameras for the past 30 minutes. I want every moment of this interaction documented and preserved. I also need you to confiscate that scanner and check its logs to confirm that it validated Dr. Richards' pass." One of the airport security guards moved to comply, clearly relieved to have clear directions from someone with obvious authority. The other guard stood awkwardly by Kyle, no longer sure whose side he was supposed to be on. Patricia turned to address the crowd of passengers. "I apologize to everyone for this delay. This is not how the Federal Aviation Administration operates, and this is not how we treat any passenger, regardless of who they are. Those of you who witnessed this incident, please provide your contact information to my agents. Your statements may be needed for the investigation." Several passengers immediately stepped forward, eager to help. The businessman in the expensive suit spoke up loudly. "Director, I saw everything. He knew that pass was valid. He tore it up anyway. I've never seen anything so unprofessional in my life." The elderly woman who had spoken up earlier added her voice. That young man was rude and dismissive from the moment Dr. Richards approached him. It was clear he had made up his mind about her before she even spoke. Patricia nodded her thanks and turned back to Kyle. "You mentioned that people like Dr. Richards were always trying to scam their way onto important flights. What exactly did you mean by that?" Kyle looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape route. "I just meant, people who don't have proper documentation, scammers, criminals. Dr. Richards had proper documentation. You admitted your scanner validated it. So what made you assume she was a scammer? What about her specifically made you think she didn't belong on this flight? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Kyle's mouth worked silently, and Patricia could see the exact moment he realized he had no good answer. No way to explain his actions that didn't expose his prejudice for exactly what it was. Maya spoke quietly, her voice sad rather than angry. You don't have to answer, Kyle. We all know why you did it. The question is whether you're brave enough to admit it to yourself. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia let it stretch, let Kyle stand in the weight of his own actions while dozens of witnesses watched and recorded. Finally, she spoke. Kyle Morrison, you are hereby suspended pending a full investigation. You will surrender your credentials to security immediately. You will not set foot in this terminal again until the investigation is complete. If the findings confirm what I've witnessed today, you will face federal charges for obstruction of government operations, destruction of federal documents, and violation of civil rights statutes. Do you understand? Kyle nodded mutely, his hands shaking as he unpinned his badge and handed it to the security guard. Patricia turned to Maya, and her expression softened again. Dr. Richards, I will personally escort you to the boarding gate. Your boarding pass will be replaced immediately with a new one, and I'll make sure the captain knows what happened here. If you need time to compose yourself before boarding, that's completely understandable. Maya straightened her shoulders and met Patricia's eyes. Thank you, Director. But I'm fine. I've dealt with worse than Kyle Morrison, and I'll deal with worse again. Right now, I have a ship to help launch, and I'm not going to let anyone delay me from doing my job. Patricia smiled with genuine admiration. That's the spirit that got you those federal medals, Doctor. Come on, let's get you aboard your ship. Maya walked beside Director Hayes through the terminal, her mind drifting back through the years that had brought her to this moment. She remembered being 7 years old in Houston, standing in her grandmother's backyard during a power outage caused by one of the massive storms that had become increasingly common. Her grandmother had pointed up at the stars visible for once through the city's light pollution, and told her that somewhere up there, humans might one day build new homes. Young Maya had asked why they would want to leave Earth, and her grandmother had said maybe they wouldn't want to, but they might need to, and when that day came, they would need smart people to figure out how. That conversation had planted a seed. Maya had thrown herself into mathematics and science with a passion that worried her parents. While other kids played outside, she filled notebooks with equations she barely understood, trying to teach herself physics concepts meant for college students. Her teachers noticed her talent and pushed her forward, skipping grades and entering advanced programs. By 15, she was taking university classes. By 18, she had her first degree. By 24, she held 2 doctorates and was working on theoretical frameworks that established researchers dismissed as impossible. But every step of that journey had been harder than it needed to be. There were the professors who assumed she had only been admitted because of diversity quotas. The lab partners who refused to take her ideas seriously until a male colleague repeated them. The grant committees who questioned whether she was really capable of leading her own research. The conferences where people assumed she was someone's assistant rather than a presenting scientist. Maya had learned to let most of it roll off her back, to prove herself through her work rather than wasting energy on arguments. But sometimes, like today, the weight of it all pressed down harder than usual. Patricia seemed to sense Maya's thoughts. As they walked, she began to speak about her own journey, offering solidarity and shared experience. Patricia had grown up in rural Montana, the daughter of a mechanic and a schoolteacher. She had discovered her love of flying at 16, when a local pilot had taken her up in a small plane. The feeling of leaving the ground behind, of seeing the world from a new perspective, had changed everything for her. She joined the Air Force the day after graduating high school, determined to become a pilot. The Air Force in those days had few women pilots, and even fewer in leadership positions. Patricia had faced harassment, sabotage, and constant questioning of her abilities. She had to be twice as good to be considered half as competent. She flew combat missions in 3 different conflicts, earning medals for valor and skill. She rose through the ranks slowly, fighting for every promotion until she commanded her own squadron. When she retired from military service after 20 years, she brought that same fighting spirit to civilian aerospace administration. Patricia had been working at the Federal Aviation Administration when humanity made its first successful faster-than-light test flight. She had watched the celebration and noticed that the team of scientists being honored was almost entirely male and entirely white. She had started asking questions about hiring practices and opportunity distribution. Those questions had made her unpopular with some of the old guard, but they had also caught the attention of reformers in the government who wanted to ensure that space exploration didn't replicate Earth's historical inequities. When the position of Director for the Interstellar Division was created, Patricia had fought hard for it. She wanted the power to make real changes, to ensure that humanity's expansion into space included everyone. One of her first actions as director was to review security clearances and project assignments, looking for talented people who had been overlooked. That was how she had first encountered Maya's name in a list of researchers who had applied repeatedly for certain high-level projects but had been consistently passed over despite stellar qualifications. Patricia had pulled Maya's file and been astounded by what she found. Here was someone who had published groundbreaking theoretical papers on quantum mechanics and propulsion systems, someone who had independently solved problems that teams of researchers had struggled with, someone who held patents on technologies that made modern spaceflight possible, and yet she had been relegated to secondary roles, always an assistant or consultant, never a lead researcher. Patricia had immediately brought Maya onto the Celestial Horizon project and given her the authority she deserved. The two women reached a private elevator that would take them directly to the boarding bridge. As they stepped inside, Patricia turned to Maya with a serious expression. What happened back there with Kyle Morrison isn't just about one prejudiced gate agent. It's about a system that still gives people like him the power to make those decisions. I've been fighting to change that system for years, but incidents like this show we still have a long way to go. Maya nodded thoughtfully. I've spent my whole career trying to prove that I belong in rooms I'm not initially welcome in. Sometimes I wonder if I should have to keep proving myself over and over, but then I think about all the young girls who might see me succeed and realize they can do it too. That makes it worthwhile. You shouldn't have to be a symbol, Patricia said. You should just get to be a scientist doing brilliant work. But until we fix the underlying problems, people like you and me, we have to be both. We have to do our jobs excellently, and also fight to change the system that makes our jobs harder than they should be. The elevator doors opened onto the boarding bridge, and through the windows they could see the celestial horizon in all its glory. The ship was enormous, nearly half a mile long, with a sleek hull that seemed to shimmer in the morning light. Its design was revolutionary, combining traditional aerospace engineering with the quantum drive technology that Maya had helped develop. That drive would allow the ship to fold space around itself, traveling distances that would take conventional rockets months or years in just a matter of days. Maya felt her breath catch. No matter how many times she saw the ship, it still filled her with awe. This was her life's work made manifest, her theories transformed into metal and energy. Inside that hull was a piece of human ambition made real, a statement that humanity refused to be confined to a single planet. And at the heart of it all was technology she had imagined first in equations on paper, then in computer simulations, and finally, in this beautiful, functional reality. You built that, Patricia said softly. Well, you and your team, but your ideas are what made it possible. When people look at the celestial horizon 100 years from now, they'll remember that a black woman from Houston figured out how to make it fly. They'll remember that humanity's reach into the stars was made possible by someone that idiots like Kyle Morrison tried to exclude. Maya smiled, feeling some of the tension from the gate incident beginning to ease. My grandmother would have loved to see this. She died before the first successful test flight, but she always believed I would do something important. She used to say that the universe was big enough for everyone, that there was room among the stars for every human dream and every human dreamer. I think she would have liked that this ship represents exactly that philosophy. She sounds like she was a wise woman, Patricia said. She was. She also taught me that changing the world is hard work, and that the people who resist change fight the hardest when they're losing. Kyle Morrison tearing up my boarding pass, that's the action of someone who feels his world slipping away. He sees the celestial horizon and he sees a future where his prejudices don't matter anymore, where people he didn't think were important turn out to be essential. That terrifies him, so he lashes out. I almost feel sorry for him. Patricia raised an eyebrow. You're more generous than I am. I'm still furious. Oh, I'm angry too, Maya assured her. But I'm also aware that anger is exhausting and I need my energy for work. Kyle Morrison gets to be a footnote in my story, not a chapter. He gets to be the obstacle I moved past, not the wall that stopped me. That's my choice to make, and I choose not to give him more power over my life than he's already taken. They walked together down the boarding bridge toward the ship's entrance. The captain, Luis Mendoza, was waiting at the airlock to greet passengers. He was a veteran of the Mars colony runs, one of the most experienced pilots in the interstellar fleet. When he saw Patricia and Maya approaching, his professional smile became genuine and warm. "Dr. Richards, welcome aboard. Director Hayes, this is an unexpected honor. I hope everything is all right." Patricia gave him a brief summary of the gate incident, and Luis's expression darkened with anger. "That's completely unacceptable. Dr. Richards, please accept my apologies on behalf of the entire crew. I want you to know that everyone on this ship knows exactly who you are and what you contributed. You're not just welcome here, you're essential. In fact, I was hoping you might join me on the bridge for departure. I think you've earned the right to see your creation perform from the best seat in the house." Maya felt warmth spread through her chest. "Captain Mendoza, I would be honored." Patricia smiled with satisfaction. "There, that's more like it. Luis, make sure Dr. Richards is treated with the respect she deserves. And when you file your flight report..." Far beyond the orbit of Neptune, hidden in the darkness at the edge of Earth's solar system, a station hung in perfect stillness. To human sensors, it would appear as nothing more than a minor gravitational anomaly, perhaps a small asteroid with unusual mass distribution. In reality, it was an observation post maintained by the Galactic Assembly, a coalition of 47 spacefaring species that governed interaction between civilizations across this section of the galaxy. The station had been there for nearly 60 years, watching humanity's progress and debating what to do about these strange, violent, brilliant creatures who had only just learned to leave their homeworld. Inside the station's central chamber, 7 beings from 7 different species gathered around a holographic display showing Earth in perfect detail. They could see every continent, every ocean, every city lit up against the darkness of night. They could zoom into street level if they wished, could listen to communications, could monitor everything humanity said and did. They had been watching the species called humans for 3 generations, trying to determine whether these newcomers should be welcomed into the galactic community or left to develop in isolation for another few centuries. Coordinator Vesh, the eldest member of the observation team, adjusted his translation device and addressed the group. His species, the Kelthians, resembled Earth's Octopi, but had evolved in the methane seas of a frozen world far from here. He communicated through color changes in his skin that the translator rendered into sounds the others could understand. "We need to make a decision soon. The humans have developed practical faster-than-light travel. They've established permanent colonies on 2 planets and 3 moons in their system. They've sent probes to nearby star systems. If we wait much longer, they'll encounter us by accident rather than through controlled first contact." A being named Solara, from the crystalline species known as the Chorus, chimed in with tones like wind through glass. "I maintain my position that humans are too dangerous for contact. Look at their history. War after war after war. They've nearly destroyed themselves multiple times with their weapons. They still have thousands of nuclear devices pointed at each other. They polluted their own planet to the edge of collapse. They create artificial divisions among themselves based on meaningless physical variations and use those divisions to justify cruelty. They are chaos incarnate." Another member, a massive furred creature called Drex from a high-gravity world, rumbled in agreement. "Solara speaks truth. I have studied human entertainment broadcasts. They glorify violence, they celebrate conflict, they tell stories of destruction and domination. When they imagine meeting other species, they immediately assume warfare. This is not a civilization ready for peaceful coexistence." But Coordinator Vesh gestured toward the display with 3 of his tentacles, changing the view to show the celestial horizon launching from Earth. "You are correct that humans have violent tendencies, but you are only looking at part of the picture. Yes, they fight among themselves, but they also cooperate in ways we rarely see. They form bonds across genetic lines, across cultural divisions, across their artificial categories. They create art that moves them to tears. They sacrifice themselves for strangers. They look at a universe that doesn't care about them and choose to care about each other anyway." Solara's crystals dimmed, a sign of skepticism. "Pretty words, Coordinator, but I have been monitoring their social networks and communication systems. Just today I observed an incident at one of their transportation hubs. A human in authority deliberately mistreated another human, based solely on her appearance. He destroyed her documents, humiliated her publicly, attempted to prevent her from traveling. This is not the behavior of an enlightened species. I saw that incident as well, Vesh replied. And did you see what happened next? Dozens of humans immediately came to her defense. The human authority figure who mistreated her was confronted by someone of even higher authority within their system. He was removed from his position within an hour. The entire event was recorded and shared across their global communication network, where millions of humans expressed outrage and demanded justice. The mistreated human was escorted to her ship by the director of their entire aerospace administration, who publicly apologized and promised systemic reform. Yes, the initial act was cruel and unjust, but the response showed a species capable of recognizing injustice and fighting against it. A fourth member of the council, an insectoid being named Trill, who communicated through pheromones translated into speech, clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. Coordinator Vesh makes an interesting point. We have observed many species over the millennia. Most that join the assembly do so after achieving internal harmony through various means. The chorus evolved as a collective consciousness, so they never experience conflict in the way individual species do. The Kelthians developed philosophical traditions that eliminated violence from their culture over 1,000 generations. The Drex achieved unity through genetic engineering that suppressed aggressive tendencies. But humans are different. They maintain their individuality, their capacity for violence, their divisions, and yet they still manage to cooperate and build and create. It is messy and inefficient, but it is also remarkably resilient. Drex growled low, a sound of disapproval. Resilient? Or simply unable to evolve beyond their base instincts? Every species must eventually choose between chaos and order. The humans try to have both, and the result is constant conflict. Constant conflict, yes, Vesh agreed, but also constant growth. Consider their technological progress. They went from basic spaceflight to faster-than-light travel in less than a century. That is extraordinarily rapid. And look at the human responsible for their quantum drive technology, the one who was mistreated today. Her name is Maya Richards. She is 34 years old, which is quite young for a human. She came from a disadvantaged background, faced discrimination throughout her career, and still managed to solve problems that had baffled their best researchers for decades. When her society tried to hold her back, she pushed forward anyway. When people told her she didn't belong, she proved them wrong. This is the human spirit, Trill. This stubborn refusal to accept limitations, this determination to be better than they were yesterday. Solara's crystals brightened, a sign of agitation. One exceptional individual does not represent an entire species. For every Maya Richards, there are millions of humans like the gate agent who mistreated her, narrow-minded, prejudiced, cruel. True, Vesh acknowledged. But those millions are increasingly being held accountable by the rest of their society. Watch their communication networks. The gate agents' actions have been condemned by humans across their planet. Their government is implementing new training programs and policies. Their media is discussing systemic change. One act of prejudice has sparked a global conversation about how to do better. They are messy and imperfect, but they are learning. They are evolving, not genetically but culturally, and they are doing it at remarkable speed. A fifth member of the council, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline matrix named Loomis, pulsed with light as it spoke. I have been analyzing human creative output. Their art, literature, music, all of it. What strikes me most is their obsession with the idea of becoming better than they are. They write stories about overcoming prejudice, about learning to cooperate, about building better futures. They imagine scenarios where they meet other species and must prove their worth. They are aware of their flaws and actively work against them. This self-awareness is rare among developing species. Self-awareness is not the same as actual change, Solara argued. They have been aware of their problems for centuries, yet those problems persist. But they do change, Trill interjected. Slowly, inefficiently, with many setbacks, but they change. I have reviewed their historical records. 200 years ago, they practiced widespread slavery. 100 years ago, they denied half their population basic rights based on gender. 50 years ago, they legally sanctioned discrimination based on skin color. Today, all of those practices are illegal throughout their major societies. Yes, prejudice still exists, as we saw today, but it is no longer socially or legally acceptable. That is progress. Drex shifted his massive bulk, causing the chamber to shake slightly. Progress is meaningless if it is too slow. In the time it has taken humans to partially reduce their internal conflicts, other species have risen and fallen. If we admit them to the assembly now while they are still so divided, they will bring their chaos with them. We will spend centuries mediating their disputes while they figure out how to coexist with themselves, let alone with us. Or, Fesh said quietly, they will teach us something we have forgotten. Every species in this room achieved unity by sacrificing something. The chorus gave up individuality. The Kelthians gave up passion. The Drex gave up spontaneity. We all made ourselves smaller, simpler, easier to manage. But humans refuse to do that. They want to keep everything that makes them complicated and difficult and chaotic, and still find a way to work together. If they succeed, they will show us a path we never considered. The council fell silent, each member contemplating this perspective. Finally, back at Gate 47, Patricia stood with her arms crossed as airport security pulled up the digital footage on a large tablet. Kyle Morrison stood nearby, flanked by 2 security officers looking smaller somehow than he had 30 minutes ago. The crowd of passengers had mostly dispersed to their various flights, but a few remained as witnesses, determined to see this through to the end. Patricia wanted them to stay, wanted them to see exactly how seriously the Federal Aviation Administration took this kind of behavior. The security chief, a veteran named Gregory Palmer, queued up the footage and handed the tablet to Patricia. She watched in silence as the scene played out on the screen, seeing Maya approach the gate with her boarding pass, seeing Kyle's face as he scanned it, seeing the unmistakable green confirmation light on his scanner. The footage captured everything in high definition, including the moment Kyle tore up Maya's valid boarding pass, his expression of satisfaction as he did it, and the contempt in his eyes as he called for security. Patricia played it again, this time zooming in on the scanner display. The green light was crystal clear, and so was the priority boarding designation that flashed on the screen. There was no ambiguity here, no room for interpretation or excuse. Kyle had known the pass was valid, and he had destroyed it anyway. "Mr. Palmer, can you pull the scanner logs from that terminal?" Patricia asked quietly. Gregory worked his own tablet for a moment, accessing the back-end systems. "Got it. The scanner log shows boarding pass number 74293 Alpha validated at 0843 hours. Full clearance confirmed, priority status confirmed. Passenger identity verified through the quantum signature embedded in the pass. No errors, no warnings, no flags. The system performed exactly as designed." Kyle's face had gone ashen. "Look, I know it looks bad, but I was just trying to be thorough. We're trained to look beyond what the machines tell us, to use our judgment. I thought something felt off about the situation." Patricia turned to face him directly, and her voice was ice cold. "What exactly felt off, Kyle? Be specific. What about Dr. Richards or her boarding pass triggered your instincts?" "I don't know. Just a feeling. You develop a sense for these things after years in the job." "A feeling," Patricia repeated. "Let me tell you what I see in this footage. I see a well-dressed professional woman approaching your gate with a valid boarding pass. I see your scanner confirm that pass. I see her speak to you respectfully and calmly. I see her offer to provide additional identification. And I see you ignore all of that and destroy federal property based on a feeling. What I'm trying to understand is what about Dr. Richards specifically gave you that feeling?" One of the remaining passengers, a young man with thick glasses, spoke up. "I was 3 people behind her in line. I saw him smile and joke with the passengers ahead of her. They were all white. When Dr. Richards stepped up, his whole demeanor changed. It was obvious what he was doing." "That's not true," Kyle protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "I treat everyone the same." Gregory pulled up additional footage, this one showing a wider angle of the gate area for the 30 minutes before Maya arrived. Patricia watched as Kyle processed dozens of passengers. With most of them, he was professional but cold. With some particularly well-dressed white passengers, he was friendly and welcoming. With the handful of passengers of color, his attitude became more scrutinizing, his questions more pointed. The pattern was undeniable once you knew to look for it. "Mr. Palmer, I want this footage preserved and copied to my office immediately. I also want copies sent to our Civil Rights Division and to federal prosecutors. This isn't just an employment issue. This is a potential criminal matter." Kyle seemed to realize for the first time how serious his situation had become. "Criminal? Come on, it was just a boarding pass. I made a mistake, I admitted that. Can't we just move on? Patricia's laugh was bitter. Just a boarding pass? That boarding pass represented Dr. Richards' ability to do her job, a job that is crucial to the success of the mission currently launching from this terminal. You didn't just inconvenience her, you attempted to sabotage a federal aerospace operation. You destroyed government property, you violated her civil rights, and you did it all while wearing a uniform that represents the United States government and the Federal Aviation Administration. Do you have any idea how bad this makes us look? She gestured to the windows overlooking the launch pad, where the celestial horizon was beginning its pre-launch sequence. That ship represents the best of what humanity can achieve. It's a symbol of our species reaching beyond Earth, of cooperation and innovation and progress. And you tried to prevent one of the key people who made it possible from boarding because you couldn't get past your own prejudices. You're a disgrace to your uniform and to every person who works in this industry. Kyle's eyes glistened with what might have been tears. I didn't mean it like that. I swear I'm not racist. I just thought she didn't fit the profile. The profile, Patricia said. And what profile is that? The profile of a scientist? The profile of a government consultant? Or the profile you carry in your head of what important people are supposed to look like? The silence that followed was damning. Kyle opened his mouth several times, but no words came out. Finally, he looked down at his shoes and said nothing. Patricia turned to the remaining passengers. Thank you all for staying and for your willingness to provide statements. What you witnessed today is completely contrary to how we operate and what we stand for. I promise you that this will be investigated thoroughly and that appropriate action will be taken. If any of you experience similar treatment from this employee or others, please report it to our Civil Rights Office. We take these matters seriously. The businessman who had spoken up earlier stepped forward. Director Hayes, I want to say thank you for handling this so directly. I travel frequently for work, and I've seen incidents like this swept under the rug too many times. It's refreshing to see someone in authority actually do something about it. This is my job, Patricia said simply. Making sure our aerospace systems work fairly for everyone isn't some side mission. It's central to everything we do. If people can't trust that they'll be treated fairly at our gates and on our flights, then we failed at our fundamental purpose. She turned back to Kyle one last time. You mentioned earlier that you've been doing this job for 15 years. In those 15 years, how many complaints have been filed against you for discriminatory behavior? Kyle's face flushed. I don't know, maybe a few. Nothing serious. People complain about everything these days. Gregory checked his tablet again. According to our records, Kyle Morrison has had 17 formal complaints filed against him over his career. 12 of those involved accusations of racial discrimination or harassment. He received mandatory training after the first 5 complaints, a written warning after 10, and a 1-week suspension after 15. This would be complaint number 18. Patricia closed her eyes briefly, feeling anger and disappointment wash over her. 17 complaints and you're still here, still in a position to harass passengers. That's a systemic failure we need to address. Mr. Palmer, I want a full review of how those previous complaints were handled and why this employee remained in his position. Someone in your chain of command decided that 17 complaints weren't enough to warrant termination, and I want to know who made that decision and why. Yes, Director. I'll have that report on your desk by tomorrow. Kyle Morrison, you are hereby terminated from your position with the Federal Aviation Administration effective immediately. Your final paycheck will be processed according to standard procedures. You are banned from entering any FAA-controlled facility, unless required to do so by the ongoing investigation. Security will escort you out of the building. Do you have any questions? Kyle looked up, and for a moment Patricia thought she saw a flash of anger in his eyes. The kind of anger that comes when someone's worldview is challenged too directly. But then it faded into resignation. No, ma'am. No questions. Then we're done here. Officers, please escort Mr. Morrison out. As security led Kyle away, Patricia stood at the window watching the celestial horizon complete its pre-launch checks. She could see small figures moving around the ship, technicians and crew members making final preparations. Somewhere inside that vessel was Maya, probably on the bridge by now, checking her beloved quantum drive systems and preparing to see her life's work perform in actual flight conditions. Patricia pulled out her phone and composed a message to her chief of staff. She outlined her preliminary findings and her recommendations for immediate policy changes. She called for mandatory anti-bias training for all gate agents and security personnel, for stronger oversight of complaint processes, and for immediate termination protocols for employees with multiple substantiated discrimination complaints. She knew there would be pushback from unions and from some of her staff, but she didn't care. This was too important. As she hit send, Gregory approached her with a concerned expression. "Director, we're going to have a media situation. Several passengers posted videos of the incident on social media, and it's already going viral. We're getting calls from news organizations asking for comment." 3 weeks after the incident at Gate 47, Kyle Morrison sat in a federal hearing room in downtown Denver, surrounded by lawyers and officials, and a future he hadn't imagined possible. The room was small and windowless, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that made everything look cold and clinical. A panel of 3 federal judges sat behind a raised bench, reviewing the evidence that had been compiled against him. Kyle's attorney, a public defender named Sharon Burke, who looked almost as tired as he felt, sat beside him shuffling through papers. The proceedings had moved with startling speed. In the old days, such cases might have dragged on for months or years, but the new Aerospace Justice Act mandated rapid resolution for cases involving discrimination or interference with space travel operations. The government argued that humanity's expansion into space was too important to allow lengthy legal battles to slow down progress or leave victims in limbo. Kyle had discovered that this meant his fate would be decided in a matter of weeks rather than months. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The video footage from the gate cameras had been played multiple times, showing clearly his scanner validating Maya's boarding pass and then his deliberate destruction of it. 17 witnesses had submitted statements, many accompanied by their own video recordings. The scanner logs proved beyond any doubt that Maya's pass had been legitimate. And most damning of all was the record of Kyle's previous 17 complaints, showing a pattern of discriminatory behavior stretching back over 15 years. Judge Helen Crawford, the senior member of the panel, looked down at Kyle with an expression that mixed disappointment with determination. "Mr. Morrison, you have been charged with obstruction of federal space operations, destruction of government property, and violation of civil rights statutes. The evidence against you is clear and overwhelming. Before we proceed to sentencing, I want to ask you directly, do you understand why your actions were wrong?" Kyle had been preparing for this moment, working with his attorney on what to say. But now, sitting under the weight of those judicial stares, his prepared speech evaporated. "I know I shouldn't have torn up her boarding pass," he said quietly. "I know that was wrong. I was having a bad day and I made a poor decision." Judge Crawford frowned. "A poor decision? Mr. Morrison, the evidence shows that you made a conscious choice to discriminate against Dr. Richards based on her appearance. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was the culmination of a pattern of behavior, documented in 17 separate complaints over 15 years. Do you understand the systemic nature of what you did?" Kyle felt defensive anger rising in his chest. "Look, I'm not a racist. I don't hate anyone. I just thought she didn't look like she belonged on that flight. I was trying to do my job and protect the integrity of the boarding process." "You thought she didn't look like she belonged," Judge Crawford repeated slowly. "And what exactly does someone who belongs on an important flight look like, Mr. Morrison?" The question hung in the air. Kyle knew it was a trap, but he also knew there was no good answer. If he tried to explain, he would only dig himself deeper. If he stayed silent, his silence would be taken as admission. "I don't know," he finally said. "I guess I was wrong about that." Judge Alan Park, the second judge on the panel, leaned forward. "Mr. Morrison, we've reviewed your employment history extensively. Over 15 years, you had 17 formal complaints filed against you for discriminatory behavior. 12 of those specifically involved accusations of racial discrimination. You received training after the first 5 complaints, a written warning after 10, and a suspension after 15. And yet here you are, facing charges for an 18th incident. What happened to all that training? What did you learn from those previous disciplinary actions?" Kyle shifted uncomfortably. "I learned that people are too sensitive these days. Everyone wants special treatment. Everyone thinks they're being discriminated against. I was just trying to do my job consistently, but if you're tough with the wrong person, suddenly you're a racist." The third judge, Marcus Webb, shook his head slowly. "Mr. Morrison, the evidence shows that you weren't tough with everyone. You were selectively tough with passengers of color, while being friendly and accommodating with white passengers. That's not consistency, that's discrimination. And it's not people being too sensitive, it's you refusing to examine your own biases. Sharon Burke, Kyle's attorney, stood up. Your Honors, my client recognizes that he made mistakes. He's willing to accept responsibility and undergo further training. He's lost his job, his reputation has been destroyed, and he's facing significant financial hardship. Hasn't he been punished enough? Judge Crawford looked at the attorney with something like pity. Ms. Burke, your client didn't just make a mistake. He attempted to sabotage a federal aerospace mission by preventing a key scientist from boarding. He destroyed government property. He violated someone's civil rights in a manner so blatant it was captured on multiple cameras and witnessed by dozens of people. And most importantly, he showed no real remorse or understanding of why his actions were wrong. He's sitting in this courtroom still trying to justify what he did, still insisting he's the victim of oversensitivity rather than the perpetrator of discrimination. Under these circumstances, I don't believe further training would be effective. Kyle felt panic rising in his chest. This was really happening. They were going to make an example of him. Please, he said, his voice cracking. I have a family. I have bills. I've worked for the FAA for 15 years. This will destroy my life. You should have considered that before you destroyed Dr. Richards's boarding pass, Judge Webb said. You had 15 years and 17 chances to correct your behavior. You chose not to. The court finds you guilty on all charges. The sentencing was swift and severe. Kyle was fined $70,000, sentenced to 6 months in a minimum security federal facility, and banned permanently from working in any capacity related to space travel or federal transportation. He would serve 2 years of probation after his release, during which he would be required to perform 500 hours of community service and attend mandatory counseling sessions focused on confronting bias and prejudice. Judge Crawford delivered the final statement. Mr. Morrison, this court hopes that you will use your time in custody to reflect seriously on your actions and beliefs. You are being held accountable not just for one incident, but for a pattern of behavior that harmed countless people over many years. The message we are sending today is clear. Discrimination will not be tolerated in humanities aerospace programs, and those who engage in it will face serious consequences. This concludes the hearing. As federal marshals led Kyle out of the courtroom, he caught a glimpse of news cameras in the hallway. His case had become national news, held up as an example of the new zero-tolerance policy for discrimination in space travel. He would be remembered, but not as a dedicated employee or a good worker. He would be remembered as a cautionary tale, as the man who tried to stop progress because he couldn't see past the color of someone's skin. Meanwhile, aboard the Celestial Horizon on its return journey from Mars, Maya stood on the bridge with Captain Luis Mendoza, watching Earth grow larger in the view screen. The mission had been a complete success. The quantum drive had performed flawlessly, cutting the travel time to Mars from 6 months to 3 days. Maya's systems had exceeded every expectation, and she had spent the past 3 weeks troubleshooting minor issues and optimizing performance. Luis turned to her with a smile. We're getting a transmission from Earth. Director Hayes wants to speak with you. Patricia's face appeared on the communication screen, and Maya could see the satisfaction in her expression. Dr. Richards, I wanted to let you know that Kyle Morrison's hearing concluded today. He was found guilty on all charges, and will serve 6 months in federal custody plus probation and community service. More importantly, his case has sparked major policy changes. We've implemented new oversight procedures, mandatory bias training with real consequences for failure, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination complaints. What happened to you is being used to train every gate agent, security officer, and administrator in the entire aerospace system. Maya felt a complex mixture of emotions. Part of her was satisfied that justice had been served. Part of her was sad that it had taken such a public incident to force changes that should have happened years ago. Thank you for telling me, Director. I hope this means the next Maya Richards won't have to deal with the next Kyle Morrison. That's exactly the goal, Patricia said. You handled this situation with grace and dignity, Dr. Richards. You didn't let anger consume you, and you didn't let one man's prejudice stop you from doing your job brilliantly. You're an inspiration to a lot of people right now. I'm just a scientist who wanted to go to work, Maya said softly. I didn't want to be an inspiration or a symbol. I just wanted to be treated fairly. I know, Patricia said. And that's exactly why you are an inspiration. You asked for the bare minimum of human decency, and when you didn't receive it, you stood your ground without compromising your principles. That takes strength a lot of people don't have. Anyway, welcome home. We're planning a reception for the Celestial Horizon crew tomorrow. 3 months had passed since the Celestial Horizon's successful maiden voyage, and Maya had settled into a routine of traveling between Earth and Mars colony every 2 weeks to monitor the quantum drive systems and train new engineering crews. The ship had become a symbol of human achievement, featured in news broadcasts and educational materials around the world. Maya herself had become something of a celebrity, though she tried to avoid the spotlight as much as possible and focus on her work. On a Tuesday morning, the Celestial Horizon was making its return journey from Mars with a full load of passengers and cargo. Maya was on the bridge with Captain Luis and the crew, reviewing performance data from the latest quantum jump. The Ka readings were perfect, almost too perfect, showing efficiency levels even higher than her theoretical models had predicted. She was so absorbed in the data that she almost didn't notice when the navigation officer suddenly stiffened at his station. "Captain, we're detecting an anomalous signal," Lieutenant Benjamin Cross said, his voice tense. "It's not from Earth or Mars colony. Source is approximately 2 million kilometers off our starboard bow." Louis straightened in his chair. "What kind of signal?" "Unknown. It's using frequencies we've never encountered before, but it's definitely artificial. Someone or something is trying to communicate with us." Maya felt her heart rate accelerate. This was it. The moment that humanity had been imagining and preparing for since they first looked up at the stars and wondered if anyone else was out there. She moved to stand beside Luis, watching as the communications officer worked to analyze the signal. "Can you decode it?" Luis asked. "Working on it, Captain." The signal is incredibly complex, layered with multiple types of information. It's like they're trying to communicate on every possible level at once: visual, audio, mathematical. "Wait, I'm getting something. It's adapting to our systems, translating itself into formats we can understand. Captain, I think they've been monitoring our communications and learning our languages." The main view screen flickered, and suddenly a holographic image appeared, showing 7 beings of distinctly non-human origin, arranged in what looked like a council setting. Maya's breath caught. There was something that resembled a massive octopus with color-shifting skin, a being made of pure crystalline structures that pulsed with inner light, a huge furred creature that looked vaguely bear-like but with 6 limbs, an insectoid being with delicate translucent wings, and 3 others even more alien in appearance. The octopus-like being's skin rippled with colors, and a voice emerged from the ship's speakers, slightly mechanical but perfectly understandable. "Greetings to the crew of the Celestial Horizon. We are representatives of the Galactic Assembly, a coalition of spacefaring civilizations that governs interaction between species in this region of space. We have been observing your world for several of your generations, waiting to determine if humanity is ready for contact with the wider galactic community." The bridge fell silent. Every crew member stared at the screen in wonder and disbelief. Luis recovered first, his training kicking in. "This is Captain Luis Mendoza of the Celestial Horizon, representing Earth and the United Nations Space Council. On behalf of humanity, we welcome this contact. We've hoped for this moment for a very long time." The crystalline being chimed in, its voice like wind through glass. "We are aware of your hopes and dreams, Captain. We have monitored your transmissions, studied your history, and observed your development. We have much to discuss, but first, we wish to speak specifically with Dr. Maya Richards. Is she present?" Maya felt every eye on the bridge turn to her. She stepped forward, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm Dr. Maya Richards. Why do you want to speak with me?" The octopus being, who had introduced himself as Coordinator Vesh, responded, "Dr. Richards, we have been watching your species closely, trying to determine whether humans are ready to join the galactic community. This is not a decision we take lightly. Contact between civilizations can go wrong in many ways, and we must be careful. 3 months ago, we observed an incident involving you at one of your transportation facilities. A human in authority attempted to prevent you from traveling based solely on your appearance. We observed this incident, and it sparked intense debate among our council about whether humanity was ready for contact." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. They had been watching. They had seen her humiliation at Gate 47, had witnessed Kyle Morrison tearing up her boarding pass. "I see," she said carefully. "And did that incident convince you that humanity isn't ready?" The massive furred being called Drex spoke, his voice a deep rumble. "Some of us argued exactly that, Dr. Richards. We said that a species so divided against itself, so prone to judging others based on meaningless physical variations, was not ready to encounter the diversity of the galaxy. We feared that humans who discriminate against each other would certainly discriminate against beings truly different from yourselves." Maya felt defensive anger rising but pushed it down. "And what changed your minds?" Coordinator Vesh's colors shifted to warmer tones. "We didn't just observe the discrimination, Dr. Richards. We observed the response. We watched as dozens of your fellow humans immediately came to your defense. We watched as a superior authority figure arrived within minutes and held the perpetrator accountable. We watched as your entire society, through your communication networks, expressed outrage and demanded systemic change. We watched as the human who discriminated against you was removed from his position, prosecuted and punished. Most importantly, we watched as you yourself refused to let that experience stop you from pursuing your work. You boarded your ship, you completed your mission successfully, and you helped advance your species' reach into space. That response showed us something important about humanity." The insectoid being named Trill clicked softly. "Most species that joined the Galactic Assembly achieved internal unity before developing space travel. They eliminated conflict through genetic engineering, hive minds, or cultural homogenization. They became peaceful by becoming uniform. But humans are different. You maintain your individuality, your diversity, your capacity for conflict, and yet you still manage to cooperate and build and create. When one of you falls, others help them up. When one of you does wrong, others work to make it right. You are messy and chaotic, but you are also remarkably resilient and adaptive." Louis spoke up from his chair. "Are you saying that our flaws are actually why you're making contact?" The being of pure energy called Loomis pulsed brightly. "Not your flaws, Captain, but your response to your flaws. Every intelligent species has darkness within it. The question is what they do about that darkness. Some species try to eliminate it entirely, but in doing so they lose something essential. Some species ignore it and eventually destroy themselves. But humans do something rare. You acknowledge your darkness, you fight against it constantly, and you use that struggle to become stronger and more compassionate. That is remarkable." Maya felt tears pricking her eyes. She thought about all the times she had faced discrimination, all the doors that had been closed to her, all the people who had doubted her abilities based on nothing but her appearance. She thought about the exhaustion of constantly proving herself, constantly fighting to be seen as equal, and now these alien beings were telling her that humanity's struggle against its own prejudices was actually something admirable. "So what happens now?" she asked. Coordinator Vesh's colors shifted to a formal pattern. "We are offering humanity provisional membership in the Galactic Assembly. This means you will have access to our technology databases, our trade networks, and our diplomatic channels. You will be able to travel freely among member worlds and establish colonies beyond your solar system. In return, you must agree to abide by assembly laws, which include strict prohibitions against slavery, genocide, and forced assimilation. You must also commit to continuing your internal work toward equality and justice. We will monitor your progress, and full membership will be granted when you have demonstrated sustained commitment to these principles." "And if we refuse?" Luis asked. The crystalline being called Solara chimed coldly. "Then we will respect your choice and leave you to develop in isolation. But you should know that there are other, less benevolent species in the galaxy who will eventually discover you whether we make contact or not. Better to have allies and guidance than to face the unknown alone." Maya and Luis exchanged glances. This was far beyond their authority to decide, but they both knew what humanity's answer would be. Humans had been dreaming of this moment for centuries, imagining what it would be like to discover we weren't alone in the universe. Now that moment was here, offered not as a threat or a conquest, but as an invitation to join something larger. Captain Mendoza and Dr. Richards, Vesh said. We chose to make first contact with your ship specifically because of what it represents. The celestial horizon was made possible by Dr. Richards' brilliant work she accomplished despite facing obstacles that should never have existed. The human who tried to stop her from boarding this ship thought he was protecting something by excluding her. In reality, he was trying to prevent the very progress his species needed. That you recognized his actions as wrong and held him accountable gives us hope. 5 years had passed since that momentous day when the Galactic Assembly had made first contact with the celestial horizon. In that time, humanity had transformed in ways that would have seemed like science fiction just a decade earlier. The technology exchanges with Assembly species had revolutionized every aspect of human civilization. Clean energy systems based on zero-point extraction had replaced fossil fuels entirely, eliminating pollution and providing unlimited power to every city and settlement. Medical advances from species who had conquered disease millennia ago meant that cancer was now as easily treatable as the common cold. Hunger had been virtually eliminated through food synthesis technology that could create nutritious meals from basic organic compounds. But the most profound changes weren't technological, they were social and cultural. Knowing that humanity was being watched and evaluated by 47 other species had created a powerful incentive for self-improvement. The ugly prejudices that had plagued human society for millennia were increasingly pushed to the margins, not eliminated entirely, but no longer acceptable in mainstream society. People who would have discriminated openly a generation ago now kept their prejudices private, and their children were growing up in a world where such attitudes were seen as shameful relics of the past. Maya stood in the orbital conference chamber of the United Nations space station, looking out at Earth through the massive transparent walls. From this height, political borders were invisible. Continents blended seamlessly into oceans, and the planet looked like a single unified organism rather than a collection of competing nations. It was a view that never failed to move her, a reminder of how small humanity's internal conflicts seemed when viewed against the vastness of space. Behind her, the conference chamber was filling with delegates from around the world and representatives from a dozen different alien species. Today marked the formal ratification of humanity's full membership in the Galactic Assembly, the culmination of 5 years of probationary status during which humans had proven their commitment to the Assembly's principles. Maya had been chosen to deliver the keynote address, a responsibility that both honored and terrified her. Ambassador Carlos Rivera, the United Nations Secretary General for Interstellar Affairs,